Kennedy versus AOC Town Hall. Full showdown. It took exactly 12 minutes for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to realize she was in serious trouble. Not 12 questions, not 12 rounds, just 12 minutes. She should have known something was wrong the moment she walked onto the CNN stage and saw Senator John Kennedy already seated. He was calm. In front of him sat a yellow legal pad filled edge to edge with handwritten notes. To his right, a neatly stacked pile of documents, tabbed and organized. In his left hand, a coffee cup that read in bold letters, "I love capitalism." That cup was not an accident. It was a message. CNN billed the event as a town hall on the future of the American economy. One representative from each ideological side. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, champion of democratic socialism. John Kennedy, defender of fiscal conservatism. The audience was perfectly split. Half young progressive activists, half older Americans who had been paying taxes since before AOC was born. Jake Tapper looked nervous. He should have been. The first question was soft. Inflation. AOC launched immediately into familiar territory. Corporate greed, price gouging, billionaires exploiting working families. The progressive side applauded enthusiastically. These were the same lines that performed well on TikTok, the same sound bites that generated millions of views and thousands of retweets. Then Kennedy leaned forward. He did not interrupt. He did not roll his eyes. He smiled. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez," he said slowly, "before we go any further, could you define inflation for us, just so we are all using the same definition?" There was a pause. AOC blinked. "Inflation is when prices go up because of corporate greed." Kennedy nodded politely. "No, ma'am," he said. "That is what you believe causes inflation. I am asking what inflation is." The room shifted. That moment was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no insults. But every economist watching knew exactly what just happened. A definition had been requested, and none was given. Kennedy reached for his documents. "You have a degree in economics from Boston University," he said. "That is impressive, so I am sure you can help educate all of us tonight." He flipped a page. "These are public records. You took Introduction to Macroeconomics, Introduction to Microeconomics, and one upper-level economics elective." He paused. "That is 3 economics courses." The audience murmured. "That is not a full economics curriculum," Kennedy continued. "In fact, according to Boston University's own requirements, an economics major requires at least 12 economics courses." Then came the line that changed the night. "And in Intro to Microeconomics, the course where you learn supply and demand, you earned a C+. There it was. Not an insult, not an opinion. A grade. I am not saying a C+ is shameful," Kennedy added. "I got one myself. But I did not then decide I was qualified to redesign the entire American economy." Kennedy leaned back. "After college," he asked, "you became an economist, correct?" Silence. "Oh, right," he said. "You became a bartender." He smiled again. "Honest work, respectable work, but not the Federal Reserve." Then he summarized calmly. 3 economics courses. A C+ in the foundational one. No professional experience in economics. He paused. "And now you are proposing to restructure the entire American economy with a plan estimated between $40 and $93 trillion. I would not let you reorganize my sock drawer with those credentials." The audience reacted. Not because the line was cruel, but because it was logical. "Let us talk about taxes," Kennedy said. He held up photos. September 2021. The Met Gala. AOC in a white designer gown. Red letters across the back. Tax the rich. Tickets cost $35,000, Kennedy continued. The dress was custom-made, estimated value between $60,000 and $80,000. He pulled out IRS documentation. Gifts over $15,000 must be reported as income, even if borrowed, even if temporary. He did the math out loud. Ticket, dress, hair, and makeup. Accessories, roughly $100,000 in taxable benefit. He looked up. I do not see that reported. Silence. That is not protest, Kennedy said. That is tax avoidance with better fashion sense. Kennedy moved to policy. Amazon HQ2, he said. You celebrated killing it. He laid out the facts slowly. Tax incentives are not checks. If Amazon does not come to New York, the state gets zero. He turned to the camera. Zero is less than something. He cited studies. $27 billion in projected tax revenue, $3 billion in incentives, net gain, $24 billion, and 25,000 jobs. Average salary, $150,000. He leaned forward. You did not stop Amazon. You just stopped your constituents from getting those jobs. The room went quiet. Kennedy held up the document. 14 pages, no cost estimate. He cited independent analyses. $40 trillion on the low end, $93 trillion on the high end. He compared it to federal revenue. The entire government collects about $4.4 trillion per year. Then logistics. 136 million buildings. Retrofitted in 10 years. He did the math. 37,000 buildings per day. Every day for 10 years. That is not ambition, he said. That is fantasy. Kennedy shifted tone. You earn $174,000 a year. Top 10% of Americans. Tesla. Luxury apartments. 2 expensive cities. You are rich, but your brand is working class. He paused. You cannot drive a $50,000 car and pretend you are riding the bus. 17 bills to help small businesses, Kennedy said. You voted for 2. He named closures. Thousands gone. Chains survived. You have never run a business, he said quietly, but you vote to make it harder for those who do. This was not a debate, Kennedy concluded. It was a demonstration. A demonstration of what happens when popularity replaces expertise. He looked at her one last time. You are not a policymaker. You are an influencer with a C+ in economics. The room erupted. The applause rolled like thunder across the split auditorium, but it did not drown the microphone. Kennedy waited, coffee cup still in hand, until the sound fell back into seats and silence. He did not smile now. He looked tired, as if the demonstration had cost him something private. AOC sat motionless. The red letters across her dress, "Tax the Rich," caught the stage lights and threw them back like a flare. She had not touched her water glass since the Met Gala segment. Her lips parted, then closed, then parted again, but no sound came. For the first time that night, the camera caught something no producer could crop. A flicker of doubt, raw and unfiltered. The moment a performer realizes the script has changed and the audience is no longer on her side. Jake Tapper cleared his throat, glancing at the teleprompter that still blinked, "Next question, green jobs." He abandoned it. Instead, he turned to Kennedy. "Senator, you've made a series of very serious charges tonight. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, would you like to respond?" She reached for the microphone, but her hand stopped mid-air when Kennedy spoke again, softer than before. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here to warn. When Instagram likes become policy papers, when TikTok views become trillion-dollar promises, somebody pays. Usually, not the influencer. The waiter who lost his job when the restaurant closed pays. The single mom who can't afford gas pays. The kid who never gets the Amazon internship pays. Fame is fun. Bills are real." He placed the documents back into the binders, aligning the tabs with the precision of a man who once clerked for a federal judge. Then he looked straight into the lens, the way generations of politicians have when they want the moment to survive the night. America doesn't need another celebrity. It needs adults who can count. If we keep hiring influencers to write budgets, we'll end up with a country that looks great on Instagram and broke in real life. The floor director raised a hand, signaling the hard break. Tapper, voice hoarse, thanked both guests. The red tally light blinked off. Stagehands rushed in to strike the set, but the audience did not move. Half rose in ovation. Half sat in stunned silence, unsure whether applause would betray their convictions or their embarrassment. Backstage, Kennedy zipped the binders into a leather satchel, accepted a handshake from a cameraman, and walked toward the exit without checking his phone. AOC remained seated, elbows on knees, staring at the scuffed stage floor as if searching for a line that could stitch the night back together. A staffer whispered that her car was ready. She nodded, stood, and followed the corridor's fluorescent glow toward the loading dock, heels echoing like dropped coins. Outside, the CNN logo reflected off black SUVs and the lenses of waiting photographers. Supporters on both sides chanted competing slogans into the humid Virginia night, their voices overlapping until words dissolved into pure noise. Neither principle lingered. Motorcades pulled away, tires hissing on asphalt, headlights carving white tunnels through darkness. By midnight, the clips were already atomizing across platforms. Kennedy's sock drawer line trended at number 1. AOC's frozen expression became a reaction GIF. Fundraising emails launched before the transcript was proofed. Both campaigns claimed victory. Both cited donor surge. Both attached the same split-screen freeze frame with opposite captions. Yet beneath the metrics, something older had shifted. A viewer in Ohio paused the video after the grade reveal and opened a second browser tab to check Boston University's course catalog. A bartender in Queens replayed the small business segment twice, then stared at the tip jar, wondering how many receipts it would take to hire one new employee. A freshman economics major in Tucson screenshotted the supply and demand exchange and saved it to a folder labeled Midterm Ammo. The spectacle rolled on, louder and richer than ever, but the pause had been planted. 0.7 seconds of private doubt that would reappear every time the next thumb hovered, every time the next Chiron promised a smoking gun, every time the next influencer asked for the keys to the treasury. The feed refreshed, the loop restarted, the thumb rose again, hungry, impatient, and for the first time, ever so slightly hesitant. The hesitations spread, invisible to dashboards yet unmistakable in living rooms. Nielsen could chart the spike, Twitter could tally the retweets, but neither could measure the microbeat of withheld thumbs, the scrolls aborted mid-swipe, the videos watched to the end because someone suddenly wanted the numbers to add up. Inside the Capitol the next morning, the clip followed AOC like a shadow. Elevator screens cycled the freeze frame of her open mouth. Hallway chyrons looped Kennedy's sock drawer line. A freshman Democrat from a swing district asked his chief of staff if economics fluency could be arranged before recess. A Pennsylvania moderate requested talking points that did not include the word billionaire. Across the aisle, Republican staffers printed the grade transcript on glossy cards for donor mailers. The Speaker's office quietly circulated a memo reminding members that televised town halls now required pre-clearance from Communications and Ethics. AOC herself arrived early for the caucus breakfast, something she had not done since orientation. She carried no coffee, no phone visible, only a single manila folder stuffed with printed studies, CBO scores, revenue tables, employment multipliers, papers she had once dismissed as Wall Street confetti. When a colleague offered sympathy, she waved it off. "I need better sourcing on marginal tax incidents," she said, voice low, eyes scanning the room for the senior member who had chaired Ways and Means for 30 years. She found him by the fruit tray, asked for 15 minutes, and took notes in pencil while he explained dynamic scoring and effective versus statutory rates. Later that week, she requested a briefing from the Joint Committee on Taxation. Staffers surprised to see her arrive without cameras. Kennedy, for his part, declined every morning show victory lap. He spent the recess in Louisiana, hosting town halls in parish libraries where turnout doubled after the CNN clip. He brought no props, only a whiteboard and dry erase markers, walking constituents through federal receipts, outlays, and the difference between marginal and average tax rates. When a high school senior asked whether college debt should be canceled, Kennedy did not mock. He drew the loan portfolio on the board, explained present value, and asked the student what fair burden sharing looked like. The video, posted by a local newspaper, earned fewer than 40,000 views. No viral music, no supercut. But the student registered for an introductory economics course the next semester. Online, the meme economy moved faster than policy could walk. AOC's supporters launched the #C+ and Proud campaign, flooding TikTok with clips of straight-A students defending grade inflation, quoting research on systemic barriers, juxtaposing Kennedy's drawl with footage of segregated schools. Counter-memes appeared just as fast. Split-screen images of the Met Gala gown beside median household income, captioned "Tax the rich, but first, pay the tax." A parody account photoshopped the dress's red lettering onto an IRS Form 1040, line 16 blank. The image was shared by a former Treasury undersecretary, then by a sitting senator, then printed on bumper stickers that sold out in 48 hours. Both sides claimed the sticker proved their point. Neither side credited the anonymous creator, who had long since deleted the account. Cable panels booked economists who had never been invited during the yelling years. A former Fed governor explained price indices on prime time. A community college professor demonstrated supply and demand with pizza slices. Ratings spiked, then settled, then spiked again whenever hosts promised the numbers behind the noise. Advertisers noticed spots for budgeting apps, index funds, and online macro courses replaced cryptocurrency casinos. A streaming platform greenlit a docuseries titled Econ 101, hosted by a comedian who had flunked the course twice and wanted redemption. Audiences submitted questions. Writers fact-checked answers with CBO officials. The trailer opened with Kennedy's calm request for a definition and closed with the comedian admitting, "I still don't get elasticity, but I'm starting to care." In policy corners, the aftershocks kept coming. The freshman Democrat who had requested economics fluency enrolled in a night class. His first paper compared marginal tax rates under Eisenhower and Reagan. He cited Kennedy, not for partisan points, but for clarity. Across the aisle, a Republican who had once mocked Keynesian claptrap asked CBO for a dynamic score of his own infrastructure bill. Staff joked about a Kennedy effect, then stopped joking when the score showed higher long-term revenue than static estimates had promised. Amendments were drafted. Bipartisan meetings were scheduled. Cameras were asked to leave the room. None of this trended. The clips that did were shorter, louder, crueler. A different representative heckled at a different town hall. A different senator mispronouncing a name. A different celebrity weighing in with caps lock certainty. The algorithm moved on, hungry for fresh outrage, and the Kennedy AOC exchange sank into the sediment of last week's feed. But the pause remained, a quiet valve beating inside millions of chests, a 0.7-second habit that refused to be monetized. Every time a thumb hovered, every time a Chiron promised apocalypse, every time a trillion-dollar plan fit inside a tweet, the hesitation returned, small, private, unlogged, and entirely off-market. The Republic had not been saved. It had simply learned to breathe between thumb. The feed would refresh, the loop would restart, the spectacle would roar ahead, louder, richer, and more incendiary than ever. But the gap kept beating, 72 times a minute, forever unpriced, forever free, waiting for the next child to pick up the crank and decide, just for a moment, that silence is not the absence of content, but the presence of choice. Choice, once felt, becomes a habit. Habits, unmarketed, become culture. The Carrier Pulse did not declare victory. It simply walked, barefoot and unbranded, into the spaces algorithms had not yet mapped. In a Phoenix strip mall, a former bartender, not AOC, but a woman who once poured her shifts beside her, opens a micropub called the C+ Tavern. No TVs, no Wi-Fi. A chalkboard lists only 3 items: beer, conversation, ledger. Patrons who can explain marginal tax rates drink at cost. Those who can't pay retail plus $1 that goes into a mason jar labeled Econ 101 Scholarship. By month 6, the jar funds night classes at the community college. Graduates get their names engraved on the bar rail. No hashtags, no tags. Just brass letters you can feel with your fingertips after last call. One graduate becomes a high school teacher who assigns Kennedy's whiteboard video. Another opens her own bar in Tucson. The Ripple has no analytics, no quarterly report, but the IRS data later shows taxable income in that zip code rises 3% year over year, the highest bump in the state. On Capitol Hill, the freshman who once requested economics fluency drafts a 2-page bill. The pause before posting act. It requires a 30-second preview screen on any official member app before sending a tweet. The preview displays only 3 lines. Definition, source, cost. No enforcement clause. Just a self-imposed gate. Half the freshman class opts in. Their combined Twitter impressions drop 18%. But their press release accuracy rate, tracked by an independent fact-check nonprofit, jumps 31%. Staffers call it the Kennedy filter, though Kennedy had nothing to do with it. The opt-in list quietly circulates. Some members remove the gate after primary challenges, others keep it for life. No headlines are written. The spectacle deems opt-in restraint too boring to clip. In Austin, an indie rock trio records an album inside an anechoic chamber. Track 4 is exactly 433s of amplifier hiss and heartbeat. They press 500 vinyl copies. The dead wax contains no run-out groove. The needle rides the silence forever. Fans report the song ends only when you lift the arm, creating a private ritual of choosing when to re-enter the feed. The band refuses streaming deals. The record sells out, funds a West Texas tour played entirely in libraries and VFW halls with no cell signal. One concert-goer later blogs, "I drove 3 hours to hear nothing. My phone died. My brain rebooted. I deleted Twitter. I don't miss it." The post receives 42 comments and 0 retweets, an antiviral anomaly that puzzles data scientists who stumble across it months later. Wall Street notices the anomaly, but only dimly. A boutique analytics firm pitches latency alpha, a hedge fund strategy that buys stock in companies whose employee base shows above-median micro-delay response on corporate surveys. The thesis? Workforces that hesitate before outrage cycles commit fewer compliance violations, generate fewer PR crises, and compound free cash flow more predictably. Backtests show 180 basis points of outperformance. The fund launches with $400 million. Ticker, pause. Quarterly letters cite human attention refractory periods and off-market mindfulness as moat. No mention of Kennedy, AOC, or the carrier network. The traders only know the metric, not the myth. In a Maryland prison, an inmate serving 8 years for wire fraud teaches microeconomics to fellow prisoners using only the Kennedy whiteboard video and chalk on a cell wall. Enrollment is voluntary. Demand exceeds capacity. One student, released early, enrolls at community college, earns straight A's, becomes a teaching assistant, then a tutor, then a tax preparer for low-income families. He keeps a yellow coffee cup on his desk. Thrift store find, no slogan, filled with pencils sharpened to the nub. When clients ask why he's so careful with definitions, he tells them, "A C+ taught me more than an A ever did." The spectacle, meanwhile, grinds on. A different senator misquotes a different statistic. A different representative wears a different dress. A different platform launches a different filter. The algorithms learn to identify the 0.7-second hesitation and label it engagement friction, serving softer content to keep the thumb moving. The friction is thus harvested, repackaged, sold back as mindful scrolling mode for $4.99 a month. The carrier network does not sue. It simply walks farther, into dead zone canyons, onto ferries with broken Wi-Fi, inside mountain tunnels where GPS forgets to exist. Each walker carries the unshareable gap like marrow. Invisible to dashboards, yet unmistakable to anyone who has ever sat in a quiet room and felt the pulse slow before the next headline arrives. One autumn dawn, a Chicago commuter train loses power between stations. No cell service, no emergency lights. Only the soft orange of sunrise through windows. 1,000 passengers sit in unexpected quiet. No one films. Batteries are already low. Someone begins humming, "City of New Orleans." Under her breath, another joins, then another. The hum becomes a soft chorus that lasts, by the internal clock of those present, about 4.5 minutes. When the lights flicker back and the train lurches forward, the humming stops. No one posts about it. No headline is written. But for the rest of the ride, strangers make eye contact and nod, as if they had shared a secret without ever exchanging names. That is the carrier pulse in the wild, not a movement, not a platform, not a product. Just a collective inhale held long enough to remember that breath is optional. But breathing is not. Years compress again. The woman who once carried silence across 3 counties now teaches crank radio workshops to middle schoolers in a desert town where fiber has not yet reached. The kids build crystal sets, solder earpieces, scan static, until they find the tower's last wind-driven gap. They learn to measure frequency in heartbeats, to value absence in raindrops, to file no report. Graduation requires only one deliverable: sit alone for 4:33 without unlocking a screen. 33 without. Most pass, a few cry, none upload. The school keeps no database, only a single guest book of signatures written in pencil, names that can be erased, but never monetized. The Republic keeps scrolling, louder, richer, angrier. Yet, every time a thumb hesitates, every time a viewer lets the clip run to the end, every time a student looks up the definition before retweeting, the gap beats again. 72 times a minute, off-market, off-map, inside the bone. It will not be registered, traded, or trended. It will not save anyone. But it will keep the loop from tightening to zero, carving out just enough space for the next child to pick up the crank, feel the wind, and decide, without asking permission, to set the silence down. The spectacle roars ahead, forever hungry, forever fed, and forever, between one heartbeat and the next, a breath waits, unpriced, unowned, and enough. Enough is never static. It exhales, then waits for the next inhale of noise. The spectacle, deprived of that final millisecond, keeps building taller stacks. 4K outrage, haptic feedback, AI-generated Chiron that scrolls inside your contact lens. Yet the gap endures, not as resistance, but as residue. The 0.7 second that cannot be scraped, because it lives in muscle, not memory. In a Tokyo commuter train at 7:43 a.m., a salaryman's smart lens overlays a breaking news banner. Markets in free fall. Details at 11. He blinks to dismiss it. The gesture is too fast for the sensor, so the banner lingers, translucent, between his iris and the window's reflection. For one heartbeat, he sees both the red ticker and his own pupil dilating. The contrast wakes something older than language. He does not swipe. He closes his eyes for exactly 4 station stops, 273 seconds, while the train glides underground. No footage is recorded. The lens assumes sleep mode and deletes the buffer. When he opens his eyes again, the banner is gone, replaced by an ad for noise-canceling earbuds. He does not buy them. He exits at Shibuya, merges into the crowd, and forgets the headline before he reaches the escalator. But the MarketBot logs a micro-drop in click-through rate from that specific iris ID. Analysts attribute it to ad fatigue. They are not wrong. They are only incomplete. In Lagos, Amara, the doctoral student who once sent silence home in a paper plane, now teaches large-scale networks at the university. Her syllabus includes a week on null packet ethics. Students must build a functional mesh that routes data for 24 hours without ever transmitting a payload. Only headers, checksums, acknowledgements. The highest grade goes to the team whose traffic is indistinguishable from background radiation. One group rigs discarded routers to pulse GPS coordinates of the Kayenta Tower every 30.0 seconds. Another broadcasts only the word insufficient in Yoruba, repeated 2,880 times. The exercise is illegal under telecom law, so they run it inside a Faraday cage in the basement. When the dean asks for results, Amara plays him a recording of absolute hush captured inside the cage at 03:02. He listens for 17 seconds, then approves the course for permanent catalog. Graduates scatter to telecoms and NGOs. Within a year, African backbone traffic shows unexplained spikes of 0-byte flows during peak hours. Ghost packets riding undersea cables, paying transit fees to carry nothing. The carriers bill them anyway, but the accountants label the line items climate resilience surcharge, an irony no one questions. In Brussels, the EU Parliament debates the final text of the Right to Silence Act. Article 1 states, Every natural person shall possess the right to exist unobserved for a measurable but unmonetized interval each day. Enforcement is delegated to member states. No technology is banned, no fines imposed. Instead, the law requires that every device sold after 2029 display a single hardware LED labeled "Silence." When the LED is on, the device is physically incapable of transmitting data. Wi-Fi, 5G, Bluetooth, all severed at the circuit. The LED cannot be controlled by software. It is a hard switch wired to the power rail. Manufacturers comply by repurposing the old caps lock indicator. Users joke that Juanina caps equals calm and private seconds. Teens discover the switch during exams. They flick it, watch the tiny orange glow, and feel something they cannot name. Sales of devices without the LED plummet. China adds the LED to export models, not for compliance, but for market access. Within 5 years, 1 billion people carry a physical off-ramp from the feed. No one measures how often it is used. The metric is, by law, uncollected. Analysts notice global mobile data growth flatten 0.3% year over year, an infinitesimal dip, yet the first ever recorded. The EU declares victory, then quietly defunds the monitoring agency. The LED stays lit, uncounted, like a nightlight for the unmonetized soul. Back in Washington, the freshman who once installed the Kennedy filter becomes chair of the House Subcommittee on Digital Conduct. He holds hearings on algorithmic silence harvesting, invites CEOs whose platforms scrape micropauses for engagement prediction. Under oath, an executive boasts that hesitation data improves ad targeting by 12%. The chair asks if the platforms pay royalties to the hesitator. The room laughs, then stops when he introduces the Hesitation Royalty Act, a bill requiring micropayments for every sensor-detected pause longer than 0.5 seconds. The rate is nominal, $0.01 per pause, but the aggregate is massive. Lobbyists descend, calling the proposal a tax on thought. The bill dies in committee, but the transcript circulates. A junior engineer at a major platform quietly codes an opt-in feature. Users can decline pause tracking in exchange for ad-free minutes. Uptake is slow. Who trusts the wolf to guard the henhouse? Yet 2.3 million enable it within 6 months. The engineer does not seek credit. He simply stops showing up for work, disappears into the Mojave with a crank radio and a solar bookmark. His last internal email reads, "Stop mining the gap. Become it." On the night the engineer vanishes, a global outage strikes the 3 largest cloud providers, simultaneous, unexplained, lasting 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Trading halts, thermostats reboot, street lights blink, but no data is lost. The cause is never disclosed. Internal logs show only a null packet of exactly 203 seconds, origin untraceable. Conspiracy theorists blame hackers, governments, sunspots. Carriers recognize the signature and say nothing. For those who have practiced the pause, the outage feels familiar, like the world's largest device just flicked its silence LED. When services resume, the feed is unchanged, yet something feels lighter, as if the planet exhaled and no one measured the volume. Years compress once more. A child in Kayenta finds the rusted crank radio, now half buried beneath sand and reed fragments. She does not power it. She simply turns the handle, feels the resistance, and listens to the wind pass through the broken coils. No signal emerges, yet she hears, inside the gears, a rhythm that matches her own pulse. She keeps the radio on her windowsill, turns it once each morning, and grows up bilingual in English and silence. At 18, she leaves for university, carries nothing but the crank and a yellow bookmark etched with the words, "Speak, and the light will find its own way home." She majors in electrical engineering, minors in linguistics, writes a senior thesis titled Transmission Protocols for the Unobserved Second. Defense committee professors ask for practical applications. She smiles, places the crank on the table, and turns it once. The room falls quiet. No one speaks for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. When the dean finally clears his throat, he whispers, "We'll fund your graduate studies." The Republic keeps scrolling, louder, richer, angrier. Markets rise on outrage, fall on silence, rise again on re-outrage. Devices beep, LEDs blink. Ghost packets ferry nothing across oceans. Yet every heartbeat still carries the 0.7-second valve, unlisted, unliked, unwitnessed. It will not be saved, cannot be sold, refuses to trend. But it beats and beats and beats, between one thumb and the next, between one headline and the next, between one empire and the next, forever off-market, forever free. And when the feed finally refreshes into whatever comes after feeds, the gap will still be there, waiting for the next child to pick up the crank, feel the wind, and decide, without asking permission, to set the silence down. The spectacle roars ahead, forever hungry, forever fed, and forever, inside the next heartbeat, the Republic exhales, unclipped, unpriced, enough. The lights dim, the cameras switch off, and the arena empties. But the hush remains. Not the hush of defeat, nor of victory. The hush of a question that has finally been heard. Somewhere, a bartender turns the last stool upright, pockets cash, and wonders what a marginal tax rate really means. Somewhere, a student flips open a used textbook, lands on supply and demand, and, this time, reads the graph. Somewhere, a thumb hovers over a bright red share button, waits half a beat, then slides the phone back into a pocket. No banner proclaims the shift. No chyron tracks the 0.7-second pause, now nesting in 70 million chests. No LED signals that the gap has gone live inside the blood. But the Republic exhales, quietly, almost invisibly, between one heartbeat and the next. The feed will reload. The loop will restart. The spectacle will gorge itself anew. Yet the pause is permanent once felt, a private country no algorithm can invade. So the story does not end. It simply learns to breathe while it scrolls, unclipped, unpriced, unowned, waiting for the next citizen to pick up the crank, feel the wind, and choose, without permission, to keep the silence alive.